Kyle Klingman with Track Wrestling for another breakdown of Dynasty Duels. This time we get to dive into the 2012 Penn State NCAA Championship team, and glad to have on Bryan Pearsall, who was at 141 pounds. Now he's an assistant coach at Penn, and I don't know if you consider it a rival, but in the same state. Welcome, Bryan. Great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
You got to explain the background there, because I'd say of all the Zoom interviews that we've done, you have the nicest background. What are the pictures there?
Yeah, so my wife was an art history major. She was an athlete at Penn State. That's where we met. And all these pictures back on this wall are her favorite stories, whether it be poems or Greek mythology. So it's kind of her little collection. I've been taking over the office during this whole shutdown. Normally she spends the most time in here, but I kind of took it over.
Is there anything wrestling themed in the pictures?
I don't think so. I think the closest one you could find is the story of the guy pushing the rock up the hill and it keeps rolling down. I don't even know what the story is actually called.
Well, you have a unique journey with the Penn State team because you were recruited by Troy Sunderland and then had the transition into Kale. What was that transition like?
Man, it was tough. I was part of the last group that came in before Kale came in as our coach. And there was a lot of uncertainty in the time when, the transition was happening, especially for those guys that were on the team that maybe didn't know, what was their role going to be? Were they even going to have a spot on the team moving forward? And there was a big shift in the culture that first year. I think the number is 17 guys either quit, left the team for, whatever reason, and whether it was the coach's decision or their decision. So there was a big shift in the culture and the time demands and the commitment levels. So everything elevated really, really quickly.
Why did you stick it out? Was there a reason that you thought it was going to be a good fit with Kale?
Wrestling to me has always kind of been my path that I knew was going to help me better my life. I'm a first generation college student, so none of my parents went to college. I'm the first person in my family to go. And I always knew that wrestling was going to kind of be my path to help pave a better life for myself. So there was never a question in my mind whether I wanted to stick it out or not. I'm just always a really hard worker and really resilient. So I just kind of saw it as a challenge, another opportunity to maybe prove people wrong and try to accomplish my goals.
Had you met Kale prior to that point?
I hadn't met him. Nope. So when we heard that he was coming in, that was a big shock. There were a lot of names being thrown around in the process. And then really kind of late in the game, it was like Cael Sanderson's name started getting thrown around. We're like, yeah, right, Cael Sanderson. He's not going to leave Iowa State. And then someone said, oh, we actually saw him on campus. And then it kind of started to get a little bit more real. So I had never met him until we had our first press conference, when he was the coach. So, obviously I grew up, having a poster of him on my wall when I was a little kid. So it was kind of surreal at first.
What was that transition like with Kale? How did you get to know him? How did you build a relationship?
It was slow going, at first. Anyone who knows Kale knows that, just kind of how his personality is. You kind of gotta, he's got to warm up to you. He's not, going to be your best friend right away. So, it was intense at first. We had these individual team meetings with everyone on the team, and it was really intimidating. Just like Casey Cunningham and Cael Sanderson, it's like one-on-one meeting with you, and I'm just like a little kid that just finished my redshirt season, and looking up to these awesome coaches. So the relationship was slow over the years, and I would say, and the coach that I was the closest to was Cody Sanderson, because he was the lightweight coach, so I spent the most time with him. But I also really looked up to Casey Cunningham, and his technique, I would say, is the one I tried to emulate the most. I think we wrestled pretty similarly with a lot of the technique that he showed. And Kale was kind of always like, the figurehead of the program, just someone that you always looked up to. If he told you something, you did it. And I would say once I was out of college and got into coaching, and my relationship with Kale, I would say, grew a lot more. maybe than our relationship when I was in college, just due to I think just being more mature on my end, and willing to reach out more and stuff like that.
With that program, as you said, you were drawn to Cody Sanderson. Now that you're
Mhm.
an assistant coach, have you seen that as a theme that athletes are going to be more close to the assistant coach and the guy they work day to day with?
Um, I would say not across the board. There's definitely some people I know in our program that have really close relationships with Coach Reyna. There's people that have close relationships with me and close relationships with Coach Pammy. So I think it depends on personalities, how do personalities mesh. Maybe it's weight classes. Um, for us, we don't do like weight class assignments. We do it based off relationship through the recruiting process, or um, like technique, like, whose technique is going to mesh well with the athlete. So I would say you probably do see that in some programs. I would say at Penn, it's not quite as common.
How about the 2012 season? You guys had won it in 2011. It was a tight race at the Big Tens, and then a tight race with Quentin Wright coming through and really coming up big. But 2012 was such a solid team across the board. Did you know that it was going to have just a unique flavor to it that year, then it was going to be a quality team going in?
We knew we were going to be really good coming in. From the 2011 team, we didn't really lose too many people. And, Kale all of 2011 was talking about, we were going to win the NCAAs, we're going to win the NCAAs. And we just kind of really started to believe that and buy into it. And then when we did, it was kind of like a really eye-opening moment. Like, wow, we can really do this. Like, we can do this here. And right away, it was never about defending. It was always about winning another team championship. So we knew we were going to be really good that year. We knew, a lot of the other teams were going to be good too. Minnesota, Iowa, Oklahoma State, among other teams, were going to be our top competitors. So we knew the margins for error were going to be really thin, and we couldn't really let our foot off the gas pedal.
Did that change the dynamic then because you guys had won it? Do you feel like that just broke the ice and then it was just off to the races? Of course, Penn State's won 8 of the last 9 championships. Do you feel like that really helped?
Yeah, I mean, really think that was the catalyst that started it. I think there was a little bit of period of time after the season was over in 11 where guys maybe weren't quite as focused. We were enjoying that championship maybe a little bit too much, and then it kind of like came back to reality. Like, there's going to be people trying to knock us off this year, so it's not going to be a given that we're going to defend this thing. And people kind of got refocused during the off season and really came in strong for that preseason and got the ball rolling.
David Taylor had such a phenomenal run that year. And even looking at the NCAA championships, you can score 30 points. That's the max. That's pinning your way through the championship. He had 29.5 points, 4 falls, and then a tech fall in the finals. What did you see out of that guy day to day in the room that you knew he was going to be really good?
Yeah, I mean, David is a unique person. I think what makes him such a strong competitor is just his focus and belief in himself. He was always really focused on his goals and how to go about achieving them. But at the same time, he was also someone that really kept the training environment fun. He'd be goofing around, playing dodgeball, whatever. But one thing that I really admired about David the most is that he could flip his switch like this, and now he's focused for practice and he's ready to go to work and, put in his full effort in that practice. So that's something I talk to my athletes a lot about, just being able to flip that switch and have fun when it's time to have fun, but when it's time to go, it's time to go. So that's something I always saw to David. Like, he could narrow in his focus kind of just really quickly.
How about Ed Ruth? Man, that guy had arms, could cradle. Was he the opposite end of the spectrum in how he approached it?
Yeah, I would say he was. David was always very outward in his goals and, what he wanted to accomplish. I think, Ed really didn't talk about that stuff. He kind of just went by the beat of his own drum. And I'd known Ed for, a lot of years. I hosted him on his recruiting visit when he was a high schooler. And, we were on the PA teams together going to Fargo and junior duels and all that. So I'd known Ed for a long time. And he was quiet, he always seemed like he kind of like, I don't want to say he didn't care, but it was just like he was so relaxed and calm. Like it would appear outwardly that, he might not have cared, but I could tell you that kid, he really cared about his wrestling and he worked really, really hard. But he just had this really unique persona. And now, he's out in MMA and people call him Easy Ed. And, that kind of started that personality at Penn State. He was just so easygoing. And on the mat, he made everything look so easy. So it's kind of natural that was his nickname.
It's cool how we look at this 8 years after the fact, and there's still just a lot of names that are relevant. And Frank Molinaro being one of those, he just retired from active competition. But what a bull. I mean, what a guy that just had a blast double and able to just really impose his will on his feet. As you kind of try to figure out where he fit in, he was a little bit older, I think, but did he have a leadership role at that point?
Yeah, Frank was 1 year older than me. So we were on the team together for 4 years. And Frank was someone that always just brought in an intense level of competitiveness, whether it was runs, live wrestling, drilling, like whatever it was, he was going to try to win everything. So him and David, I think, really brought out the best of each other because, while they were different weights, they didn't really wrestle that much. Sometimes they did, but they were always trying to, win the sprints or compete against each other in the room. So Frank was an intense competitor, and I think that's what really made his run in 2016, making the Olympic team, really successful for him. Is he just is an intense competitor, and when he wants something, he'll put his whole heart, his whole effort into trying to accomplish that goal. So Frank is someone that I would say he brought intensity to the team, and a word we would always use to describe Frank was just savage.
And then Nico Megaludis, man, I don't know that he gets the credit sometimes he deserves. In the top 3-4 years, second, third, and then redshirted, and then won it as a senior in 2016. But he just seems like he's a cerebral guy, and that just another guy that just would do anything to win.
Yeah. The thing that I admired the most about Nico is that he just he lived such a clean life. When you talk about guys that do everything right, I think, that's the person I think of the most. Like whether it was his diet, his sleep, when he was going to study, when he was going to train, like he had his whole day scheduled out pretty much to like the calorie of what he was going to eat when. And when he won his national title in 2016, that was like one of those that I just felt so good for him because I knew everything that he put into that, trying to accomplish that. And, like it would have just been earth shattering for him if he didn't accomplish that goal, just because I know how much it meant to him, how much he put into it. So yeah, he doesn't get a whole lot of love. He wasn't someone that, people see, like a Spencer Lee, guys that are just like completely dominating. But, Nico was incredibly difficult to wrestle. And a lot of people really respected his game and the competitiveness that he brought to it. But yeah, Nico, he put everything he had into it.
And then Quentin Wright, a guy I don't know at all. I just know his results, and 3-time finalist, 2-time champ, and really came up big in a big way. But any idea where he is? And of course you can speak to what he brought to the room.
Yeah. Quentin is coaching now in PA, in Central PA where he's from. I last saw him at my wedding that was coming up on 2 years ago now. But he competed a little bit once he graduated with the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, and then he stepped away. I think he's working in human resources now, the last I heard, for a job there in Central PA. But Quentin, man, he was just like, he was a honey badger. Like he didn't care. He would just go out and try to throw people. I always thought Quentin was a little bit unique because he was such a strong wrestler with his underhooks. If you watch his NCAA final versus Dustin Kilgore, the way he gets to those underhooks and his throw-bys. But he was always funny because he said in the practice room he wouldn't do his best techniques. So let's say like, his headlock or, his underhook throw-bys, like he would make a point not to work on his best stuff, which is like I tell my athletes now, like make sure you get reps on your best stuff because you want to continue to sharpen that sword. And he was really unique because he's like, I'm not doing what I'm good at. And sometimes he would just get his butt kicked in the room, by like guys that were second string, third string, and you'd see him like, this guy's an NCAA champ. But when he stepped on the mat and the lights were on, he shined. And he was fearless out there on the mat. And when he won the NCAA championship in 2011, a lot of people don't know this, but he had a really bad injury at the Nittany Lion Open where he dislocated his shoulder. And he lost a lot of his matches that year in the Big Ten schedule. I think most people wouldn't have competed at all, but he was wearing the big shoulder brace and he was going out there and trying. And then he kind of started to get healthy at the end of the year and then made the run, I think from the 8 or 9 seed at Big Tens to win it, and then really low seeded NCAAs to win it. So he was really kind of like a big part of the catalyst of our program as well, because he started as a true freshman, and that was in Sunderland's last year, and All-American as a true freshman, and then redshirted that next year. But yeah, I would put Quentin as one of the top leaders on our team during that time.
And then I got to say, man, you are hilarious. Of course, this is Dynasty Duels, and you guys are going against an Iowa team from 1997 that set the all-time point record. But when we tweeted out the matchups, you had a really funny tweet about going against Mark Ironside. Love what you're thinking about that, but that potential matchup, what do you think?
Yeah, I like to find humor in things, and I think life is supposed to be fun, right? So if we can't make fun of ourselves, then when can we? But I think and honestly, it's just an honor to even be in the consideration of like being on some of the best teams of all time, and wrestling against some of these teams, like coached by Gable. Like I grew up, watching these teams. Like it's just an honor. So as far as the match would go, I would say I would do what I always do and bring my full effort and fight, and hopefully try to score some points and lock up a cradle. And I know that he was a dominating force, won the Hodge Trophy. I've wrestled Hodge Trophy winners before. I've wrestled Jason Ness and Jordan Oliver, and a lot of really good guys throughout my career. So I think it probably wouldn't have been a feel like I hadn't wrestled anyone that good. So my 2012 season was a tough season because it was like right when I was starting to turn the corner and really make some improvements. But I just had a brutal stretch just with the matchups I had. I remember one time, I think it was like late January going into February, I wrestled, I think, like 6 top 10 guys in a row. So I didn't have the benefit of an easy schedule. So sometimes like I knew I was making improvements and I was getting better, but it was hard to track and measure that.
Thanks for sharing these memories. This is fun to look at this and just see the hypothetical matchups. And yeah. 2012 certainly was a unique year, but thanks for breaking this down and giving us an insight into Penn State 2012.
Yeah, no problem. I want to give a couple other guys shout outs, like Dylan Alton in 2012 was really, really good. He struggled with injuries later on in his career. I think he had 3 shoulder surgeries by the time it was all said and done. But Dylan was really, really strong competitor when he was healthy. He had 2 overtime matches with Derek St. John this year, who went on to win, an NCAA title. And unfortunate that he didn't get to finish out his career healthy, but this was his only year where he was really healthy, and he was 3rd as a freshman. And then another guy that was a really strong competitor, Cameron Wade, our heavyweight this year. He ended up being around at 12, 2 years. I think he's one of the best heavyweights ever that didn't All-American. He had wins over guys like Zach Ray and Tony Nelson and Don Bradley, like some of the guys, Mike McMullen, that you look at as like all-time great heavyweights. And, he was competing with those guys, beating a lot of those guys. So, again, injuries kind of dampened his NCAA tournaments there. So, but really strong competitor and someone that, was a heavyweight force on our team.
And then I'll give a shout out too here, the voice of Penn State wrestling. Did you get to know Jeff Byers?
I did, yeah. Ironhead. He was always on the trips with us. Early on, I didn't really know him too well, but later on in my career, he's a really funny guy, and got to know him well and continue that relationship on.
Again, thanks for joining us on this breakdown of Dynasty Duels, and we'll see how it plays out going against the 97 Iowa team. And We'll see if you make it to the semis.
Yep, I'm calling a 5-5 split. It's going to come down to bonus points.
All right, you got it there from Bryan Pearsall. Thanks for the time.
All right, see you, Kyle.